Follow the money. That's what I always say. You always follow the money. Yeah.
This is Follow the Money with Mitch Moss and Paulie Howard on VSiN.
Here we go. Welcome in. It is Follow the Money on VSiN, the sports betting network. Mitch Moss along with Jonathan Von Tobel, who was in today for the Under the Weather Paulie Howard. We're live in downtown Las Vegas from the Circa Resort and Casino. Very busy 3-hour program lined up today. Of course, what happened this weekend in Super Wildcard Weekend of the NFL. Moving forward and spinning that into the divisional round numbers that we have in the matchups on the program. Nick Bogdanovich, sports gambling Hall of Famer, longtime Vegas odds maker here at Circa Sports. Zach Cohen, some best bets from him tonight. And Adam Burke, managing editor, vsin.com, with some best bets from him tonight and this week as well. JVT, how was the weekend?
It was good. It was busy. I was actually telling you right before we came on the air that I had forgotten before I walked out of the door that Ohio State, Texas had actually happened on Friday night. Technically part of the weekend recap.
Doesn't even seem possible.
It was insane, and I guess this is what we're going to get with the expanded college football playoff. Obviously, the Super Wildcard Weekend. I think maybe college football might want to rethink having one of their primetime games on a Friday night leading into a wildcard weekend because it's going to be forgotten by the time we get to Monday. But this weekend was absolutely insane. A lot of football, a lot of great football. And by the way, mixed in all of that, a lot of really good basketball games in college and pro and everything in between. So
Sure. I would say for the NFL side anyway, thank goodness for last night's game in terms of drama, because that was pretty much all we had.
Yep.
It was blowout after blowout or stink bomb after stink bomb leading into the game last night. And that was a fantastic finish and a really good game. And yet again, Jaden Daniels and this Washington offense did not punt. Think about this. What a tweet this is from Doug Clawson. Daniels has more games in his career where his team has 0 punts and 0 turnovers, 3 games overall, including the playoffs, than the combined careers of Tom Brady, Joe Montana, Peyton Manning, and Patrick Mahomes. They've combined for 2. He's done it for 3 in his rookie season.
Okay, I feel like we're misleading a little bit there with that stat. They did go for it on 4th down 5 times.
Okay.
Right? So,
but that I would also argue that was the correct move to make.
No, I know. I'm just saying, when we say, like, hey, man, this offense led by Jaden Daniels, they weren't scoring on every single drive, and they went for it on 5. But he was still impressive nonetheless. The lowest moment for him was on one of those goal line possessions where he misses his tight end. They're rolling him out right. For some reason, and it's weird because all year long he's pulled the trigger on harder throws, but for some reason doesn't want to do it. So he keeps it in his pocket, ultimately doesn't get there. I think that was probably his worst decision of the day. So I don't want to take away from how great he was, but generally, I like this. I think teams should be doing this more. Dan Quinn, now obviously Dan Campbell as well. This is what you do to win games. You go for it on these 4th downs. You get aggressive. You put the ball in the hands of your best players, and that is Jaden Daniels in this offense.
Here's the thing, right? At least they were consistent last night.
Yes.
Pick a lane and then stay in your lane. Don't pick and choose throughout the game. Well, we better go for it this time, although I don't know what we're going to do next time. They had a plan last night in the flow of the game. Situation called for it. And again, 4 times they went for it on 4th down in field goal range. They got it twice. They failed twice. They also scored 14 points. If they settled for the field goal every time, the most they could have done was 12.
Yes.
Hello, math majors out there. Okay, so that's my thing that I've said for 15 years probably. Like in college football, there was a season where Oregon football, Mark Helfrich said, I think we're going to go for 2 every single time. Mm-hmm. And I actually think that you can make the case that going for 2 every single time is totally fine as long as you have like a design where your short yardage plays are good and they work and they're creative and they're effective. The problem so many times is that the short yardage plays in college and the NFL are garbage.
Yes.
So I have a bigger problem with that than anything else. But it proved to work last night for the team. And I'd say that maybe my hottest take of the entire season in the NFL, and I will also be consistent with this because this goes back to after the Commanders beat the Bengals Monday night, week 3, I said, why is Jaden Daniels not the MVP right now of the season? If you go back and look what the Commanders have been like, with the exception of the 1 year by RG3, also his rookie year, for the most part, like last 25 years, irrelevant and terrible organization. And last year's offensive numbers were rock bottom. This year, at or near the top in major metrics across the board. Mm-hmm. And I know the replacements at coaching staff, right, with Dan Quinn taking over as the head guy, Kingsbury the OC, massive difference, massive upgrade. They weren't winning 13 games, including last night with Sam Howell at quarterback. This guy's the reason why. And if I had a vote, which I don't, but if I had a vote for the MVP, and I've said this all year long, I would have seriously given that guy consideration.
Yeah, I for me to be strong, I think you include them on the ballot if we're talking about ranking and maybe inside of if you have, they only rank 3 though, correct?
I think it's 5 now.
If it's up to 5, then I think you talk about including him in the ballot. Maybe not first, but I think your overall point. Look, it's also proof of concept that we always talk about these teams and how poor they are run. Mm-hmm. It starts from the top and works its way down. When you are a well-run machine at the top, when you have people making the decisions to hire the people that make better decisions, to then hire the people to go and find the pieces that you need, all of a sudden everything works into motion. So you see a team like Cleveland, I saw this getting thrown out there, right? A team like Cleveland who now goes into this draft with the 2nd overall pick, much like the Commanders did last year. Look what you can do in the span of a year if you make all of the right decisions.
Correct.
But it starts at the top. But generally, I wouldn't disagree with anything. And, I was talking with Gil Alexander about this when I was on with him the other day because he had us submit our Rookie of the Year ballots, like all the regulars on the thing. And I still pick Brock Bowers because my stance is that Brock Bowers is the best at his position as a rookie, and I feel like that gets him the win for Rookie of the Year over for the older Gene Daniels for me. Having said that, Gil's retort was he changed the franchise, and to me that is worth more than the statistical output that a Brock Bowers did for somebody like the Raiders, and I can totally understand that.
That's everything I just said about the MVP fits into that exact sentence that you just pulled out from Gil then.
Yep.
And so he and I would be on the same. This team was nobody. I went there a couple years ago, stayed in D.C. for 4 days. My first time ever there. Great city, loved it, had an awesome time. And my wife and I walked or Ubered everywhere around the city. And I said it the day I got back, my biggest observation, Snyder still owned the team. He had to get rid of him. It was on the verge of happening. I did not see a single Commanders logo anywhere in that city and I paid attention. I made it a thing because it was in the news at that point. Walking across like several blocks, bars, stayed real close to where the Wizards play their home games or whatever. Nothing. There wasn't one place promoting Commanders football because nobody cared because they were so bad for so long.
So to your point, I'm a crappy millennial, so I like TikTok. Please, come on, government, do the right thing. But what I say that is there was a TikTok video that popped up on the feed. It was this older guy, right? Looked like he's like in his 40s, 50s. And he's watching the end of that game last night. And he's telling his wife who's recording him, yeah, I'm going to cry if they win this game. I'm going to cry. You don't understand. They have sucked. I'm 45 years old. It's been terrible for the longest time. Jaden Daniels is the best player, and he's got tears in his eyes, and he's watching this kick go through. So to your point about changing the franchise, the direction, caring about it, absolutely. I totally understand what this has been, and you see it now for everybody. We know people who are Commanders, Washington Redskins fans around this city. It's been crazy to see it that this actually makes a difference for these people personally.
Okay, so are they live in the divisional round against Detroit? The betting market would tell you that they thought the opening number at the Westgate Superbook here in Las Vegas was way too high. They opened 10.5.
And going down that path of fading these favorites has really been profitable for a lot of people.
Oh, sure. It happened again this weekend, right?
Yep.
Money on the Steelers before game time. Good luck. I said this all week last week. I'm probably not going to bet the game, but there's absolutely zero chance I'm making the case for Pittsburgh. So if you want him, go ahead. Be my guest. I'm not doing it.
So I've been very upfront about this. Of all the teams in the National Football League, the Commanders are the one that I've had the worst read on. I have been lower on Washington than most, and I have been wrong about that. I think Super Contest, you go back, I was 1-5 in games that I selected with them.
Wow, really?
I have not had a good read in them in any way, shape, or form. So I say that before I say that I would rather go with Detroit here in this spot than Washington, because I am still waiting for this defense to show its averageness, which was what every metric would tell you, right? They're pretty average defense in the NFL, and we saw glimpses of it for Tampa Bay. Baker Mayfield looked pretty good last night for the most part. 15 of 18, 185 yards, 2 touchdowns. Problem was, couldn't get his hands on the football.
They never had the ball.
Yep, 35 minutes of possession for Washington. So if you can do that, and that's theoretically, that is a possibility with how banged up Detroit has been defensively. If you can hold on to the ball for that long, keep away from Goff, Ben Johnson, and that offense, then you're going to be pretty alive here. But I feel like if there was going to be an offense that was going to expose a lot of what you see in some of the data for Washington's defense, it would be going on the road to take on Detroit.
Montgomery's going to be back.
Mm-hmm.
They have a week to prepare.
Yep.
After their bye week this year in the regular season, Detroit went to Dallas and won 47-9. And in that game, Ben Johnson is a mastermind at calling plays and an offensive coordinator. I always say he's going to bring the good stuff in the game when they have extra time to prepare. He's not going to, why would they withhold anything in this game?
Sure.
People had a major problem when they did that stumble play against the Bears. Why would you do that and not save it for the playoffs? It's because he saw it happen against the Bears. And oh, by the way, if you've paid attention at all to Ben Johnson, like that's one play out of like 1,000 that he can come up with.
He's probably got like 20 more.
Yeah, exactly right.
So it doesn't really even matter. And let's look, we talk a lot about this offense for very good reason. Let's give Aaron Glenn some credit because they had a really good defensive game plan on that Sunday night against Minnesota. And he pulled it out, and that was great. And so now, look, they already did it. It's rookie quarterback on the road against Tampa Bay. We know about everything, and they went out and they did it. They got the victory there. But now you got to go. Arguably, it's interesting. It's like these two, you open up talking about the franchise direction and changing a franchise. Think about these two franchises and where they've been throughout the course of the history. And now one dream has to die for the other to live, for the other to move on. So now you got to go on the road and take on them in this spot, given what this team has been through. And look at what Detroit did emotionally in that Monday night game against San Francisco, in that they know, right? Hey, we lost to this team. We're going to put everything into that. They also know that they came out short in an NFC championship game, obviously, and want to put everything into it. It's going to be a really interesting spot. But I just go back to defensively, I haven't trusted Washington, but I've also had the worst read on this team. So I would not feel comfortable personally.
Let's spend a couple more minutes expanding on where it opened at the Westgate compared to other books. And also what you said there about favorites, betting favorites here has been the way to go in the NFL for a while now.
Yeah. I'll just say this to set it up. I'm very surprised at the surprise of where the Westgate Superbook opened their number.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people who have been belly aching about these favorites coming in. And I know you're the master of teases, but I'll tease like this. I thought you had the answer to this problem when we had a pregame crosstalk weeks ago on VSiN Prime Time.
Okay, so we'll share that coming up as well. Big day, by the way, for us here on Friday here on the network, as we are going to be launching again on Sirius XM channel 158. That's this Friday. The entire network can't wait. Been a while, but we make our return coming up on Friday here on the Vegas Stats and Information Network. And also, he improved to 15-2 ATS in the second half of this season. We'll tell you who coming up next.
This is Follow the Money on VSiN.
So Adam Burke, again, managing editor of VSiN.com. He's on the program coming up in a couple of hours. He wrote down and had a nice story on the opening numbers for the divisional round at VSiN.com. Go check it out. He wrote this from that Lions-Commanders matchup. The Superbook here in Las Vegas opened up quickly after the game, and they hung 10.5 with the Lions, total of 56. DraftKings opened up much lower at 7.5. Total was 55.5. Adam wrote they quickly moved it to 8.5. BetMGM opened it, the line 10 and 54.5. Talk about a difference in opinion, and he thinks it's going to go back and forth between like 7.5 and maybe close to 10 like the entire week. So what were you saying in the first segment now about how the Westgate opener was way too high, but yet what's been the story of the NFL now for the last, 3 months?
It's the favorites. And I'm really kind of shocked. And again, this is not I think there's immense value. What I'm shocked at is the shock. And again, Twitter is a very small bubble, but it's sports gambling Twitter as a whole. And you hear this reaction to, wow, 10.5, that's insane. That's too high. You see the market moves too. It's not even just Twitter. You see the way the market reacts. Sure. Let's talk about the steam that was on Denver right before the game against Buffalo. We've seen it multiple times. We saw some steam on the Pittsburgh Steelers right before the game against the Baltimore Ravens. And you keep seeing this push by the market overall to jump on some of these underdogs. And then when the game ends and the favorites cover every single one of these numbers, and you sit back and go, man, these favorites, they continue to come in. What can you do? And it's like, and I alluded to this, I think this was either a Vikings Monday night game or maybe it was Giants Steelers, whatever it was. But we were discussing, it was right at the start of all these favorites coming in. And you brought up the point, which was, why can't these numbers just be higher? Why can't these sides and just be more? The gaps between these teams, especially some of the bad ones, might be relatively large. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing these favorites come in left and right. And so when they come in, we ask the question of like, man, these favorites, how can this keep happening? When the reality is maybe we shouldn't stick to, and I say the collective we, this weird mindset of laying chalk is for losers or for squares, and that maybe there is an edge in playing some of these favorites, and that maybe, just maybe, we should accept that the gap between some of these good teams is a little bit larger than what we initially thought. And I'll invoke the Baltimore Ravens one more time. People were shocked that the Ravens covered against the Steelers over the weekend, when in the 4 weeks after their bye leading into the postseason, they covered a 17-point favorites against the New York Giants and 20-point favorites against the Cleveland Browns.
Good point.
And so I think it's just kind of interesting watching that conversation. I think some of it has to do with the love for betting underdogs. I think some of it has to do just with the thought of these teams can't be that far apart.
Too many
in
points.
The NFL. Right.
There's good value on that team right now with that many points.
Maybe the reality is that gap is that big.
That can be a thing for a full year.
Yeah.
Much like a team winning like 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 games by one score for a full year. What generally happens the next year? It comes back to the pack a little bit.
By the way, look at the Commanders who keep pulling these out, the rabbit's head, right?
Sure.
The cardiac Commanders that they are now called.
There were years where the Seattle Seahawks did that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the Vikings a couple of years ago, the Giants a couple of years ago, and it usually, but for one season, that can be a thing, or it's like turnover margin, right? Where maybe one team has a plus 30 turnover margin on the season, and their defense has just been lights out with the takeaways, and their offense was really careful and super efficient and not turning the ball over. Generally, that's not going to be a thing for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Like it's very unsustainable. But for 1 year, that can be a thing. And certainly this year in the NFL, after that red hot start by the Dogs, it has completely flipped in the story again this weekend. Thank God for the game last night because we had nothing but blowouts in the NFL.
Yep. Absolutely. That's why I find it interesting how we react to these sort of things. And so, again, you see, right, bringing it back to what we're talking about here. So you see one shop kind of make the stance of like, yeah, these favorites have been coming in. Let's make this 10.5. This gap, we should probably measure this gap a little bit wider. Yeah. And then you see the market immediately cut into that. And then some of the chatter around it is that's a pretty crazy number. But then after the weekend, if the Lions win by like 14 points, then we're going to get right back into the vicious cycle. Like, man, these favorites, what are we doing?
No, it's a good conversation to have. Right. I think it's maybe a little bit necessary as well. But I will tell you that I'm not advocating for people to run out and bet the lines right now at minus 7.5 or 8.5. In fact, I would tell you that if it goes back to 10.5, which it won't, but if it did, I would take the Commanders. Because I like this team. But I had their win total over. I had Daniels immediately to win Rookie of the Year. I was higher on the team than you were before the season started, and I kind of stuck with that. So I like them a lot overall. But also, it kind of reminds me of, I'll use a one-game sample size for you. There was a game of the year that was hung over by Chris Andrews at the South Point several years ago, probably 3, 4, 5 years ago. And it was Michigan-Notre Dame, and I think I want to say he made like Michigan 7, right? And people were like, oh my God, that's a horrible number. I think Notre Dame went off the favorite in the game. They're going to get carried out on this game. Bad number. Michigan won by 7. Mm-hmm. So everybody in the world bet Notre Dame, mocking him, made the wrong number. His number was spot on the entire time. Again, Detroit might win this game, 34-10, but it's strange the way the whole thing has happened.
Yeah, and I want to stress, too, to that point, I'm not saying go and blindly bet these favorites.
No, that's not what I'm doing either.
Yeah, my whole point is just like you got to look for some of, like, if you look at Baltimore, for example, if you actually looked at what the Steelers were, we talked about these on these primetime crosstalks, right? We saw a team that secondary was not good, that a team defensively had really nothing outside of some really strong edge rushers, and that was about it. You saw an offense that was really reliant on boomer bust passes and didn't have anything in between. And then all of a sudden, all that stuff plays out on a Saturday in a playoff game, and we're surprised that that's going to happen. You look at a Denver team in which I think when you match up them against with Buffalo, you saw a team that was barely getting by, and I shouldn't say barely getting by, beat up on weak opponents. But when you saw them match up with some pretty good opponents, especially defensively, you saw the Browns have 499 total yards against the Denver Broncos. You saw the Chargers have nearly 400 total yards of offense against them. You saw the Bengals rack up, 599 total yards against them? All of those opponents I'm mentioning down the stretch averaged about 6 yards per play against that defense. So what I'm saying is just look a little bit harder and find these things, and you can find reasons why these numbers are so big and why maybe you should maybe look in that direction as opposed to trying to find reasons maybe that's not the case. So that's all I wanted to point out here. But I just find it interesting that this dynamic is happening where you get this push and pull of the conversation around the favorites cashing in, but the market continuing to come in on these underdogs.
You can't make them 10.5.
Yeah.
You can't make Baltimore 10 against Pittsburgh.
Why not?
Okay. Have fun. Have fun betting that dead team going into the playoffs.
Yep.
So more on that coming up in a little bit. I will pay off the other half of that tease, by the way. And this is a good tweet from Evan Abrams. As he said after the Bills game yesterday, another second half ATS win for Josh Allen. He is 15-2 ATS second half this season. When he plays for the second half and his career, he is 74-44-3. That is 63% in the second half. Best of any quarterback in the NFL over the last 20 years. Pretty good.
Yes.
Did you do anything with that game?
I ended up, when the number got down to 7.5, I laid it with Buffalo.
Did you?
Yeah. That was a bridge too far. And to me, it was sticking to what we talked about. What I just mentioned was, I think if you really dove into Denver's defense, you did see a unit that was very strong against some of the weaker offenses in the NFL, but down the stretch really did get exposed by some adequate, we'll call them offenses, from Cleveland to Cincinnati to L.A. and others. And obviously, Buffalo can be an offense like that, and we really saw them in the second half when they started to take off. So I thought it was just a bridge too far when we got down to 7.5. And we'll see, because I am very big on Baltimore, and I like this team a lot. And now we get this spot where Baltimore is laying a point on the road against Buffalo, and I can't wait to see it.
I was a little bit surprised by the opening number. Bills lean 1.5, and I'll say, because I was here at Circa watching the games on Saturday with Mike Palm, VP of Circa Resort Casino. We were kicking around that potential matchup, right? And it was in the middle of the Baltimore game, and they were blowing out Pittsburgh. And I asked him what he would make Baltimore at Buffalo. He thought about it for a second. He said he'd make Baltimore 2. I said I'd probably make it pick 'em. And it opened up Buffalo minus 1.5, and in the money line, Baltimore was plus 106. I grabbed it immediately, because I didn't think there was any way the number was going to keep going up in favor of Buffalo. I thought it would only come back, and maybe this would toggle back and forth between who is the small favorite for the entire time. And so I like the plus 106 number. That was a number grab more than anything else. If I want to get off of it, I might, but I don't think I'm going to. I think Buffalo's very good. I think Baltimore go there and easily win this game.
Sports betting and trading, understanding probability, the ultimate game changer. Unlock the secrets of high probability trading with Todd Bubba Horowitz, former floor trader, seasoned sports bettor, over 45 years of experience. BubbaTrading.com/VSiN. Use it today. Use promo code VSiN500. Save $500. Don't miss your chance. Sharpen your strategy. Gain the edge in your trading game. BubbaTrading.com/VSiN. Promo code VSiN500.
So we are both very high on Baltimore long term, right?
Yeah.
Are these the two best teams in the AFC?
I think that's somewhat fair to say. I think you can maybe quibble with Kansas City and Buffalo and where you would rank those two, but I think that number one with a period is with the Baltimore Ravens. I don't think there's a question about it.
And here's the thing, and we'll do this with Sam Darnold coming up as we get into Monday Night Football here in a little while. How do you compare like sample sizes, small sample sizes compared to like year-long or even like career-long sample sizes? Baltimore defense has been damn good lately.
Yeah.
But season to date, still, some of their their numbers, like if you really look into the metrics, like, doesn't look so hot. But that's kind of flipped.
It has now, and I would be unfair if I did not mention, because I've done this now with a couple of times. The last 4 weeks, they've played the Giants, the Steelers, the Texans, the Browns in the regular season, and then they played the Steelers again.
And there's the rub.
Yes. So they have been better defensively, but they've been doing against a lot worse offenses than the one you're about to face here.
Oh, they're going to see a machine.
Yes.
Yeah. I also have some severe question marks about the Buffalo defense. So, against that unit that they're going to face. So much more on the divisional round. There's at least a decent chance this guy's hot run was a fluke, and we watched the second worst quarterback performance over the past 10 years. Find out from who next.
This is Follow the Money on VSiN.
So the Eagles advance to the divisional round. They will play the winner of tonight's game on Sunday in Philadelphia. That was a dud of a game yesterday. Now, I know that the Packers had several injuries on the offensive line, wide receivers.
They lost every single one of their wide receivers, it seemed like, by the end of the game.
Every player was going down. So this is going to sound like I'm completely overreacting, but if you watch the games, is it at least fair to bring up the question of whether or not Jordan Love is like this super good quarterback we all thought that he was during this magical 6 or 8 game run that he had last year?
During Toyota-thon.
Right? Or is it possible like that run that he had last year was a fluke? Again, if you watch the games, the footwork is terrible. The decision-making, the passes are always high. He's throwing into coverage all the time. I don't know. 2 years in, I don't know what to say about the guy.
I feel like I know what Jordan Love is at this point right now, personally. I think he is a fine quarterback that's being paid too much, that needs to have everything go right for him, and he needs to be on a team that is playing with the lead. I mean, this team
very good as a front runner.
Yes, and I don't mean that as an insult, but it's just the way that this team is constructed, the way that he has played. I don't think that he is a quarterback that is going to be able to get you back into some of these games if they are trailing, or if they're like, hey, buddy, you got to go get this for us, right? You got to go get this with your arm. Jacobs in the run game isn't really working out for us for the most part, and we're trailing. We need to get back into this thing because of the mistakes we've made. And I think we've seen it a couple of times now. And that might be because of the way LaFleur has constructed this offense, but I do think part of it is the way that Jordan Love plays. And there's some less than impressive throws. I mean, the interception on the sideline where he tries to go deep and it looked like he was throwing it over the shoulder. Was it Slay who picked him off there, or whoever it was? Some of the throws, like you said, you kind of wonder, like, okay, what are we looking at here? What are we doing?
How about the INT underneath picked off by the linebacker?
Yep.
What was that?
Yep.
Where are you going with the football, pal? Like the careless interceptions, and now he was really good for like the last 7 games not turning the ball over, but he had an INT or multiple INTs in every game to begin the year, and they showed up again, and they were ugly yesterday in that game. And I also need to bring this up too, a broader point about the NFL, about stuff not being reviewable or not using different camp. How is it possible that we have this sport in 2025 with the angles available from above, but the referees on the field aren't allowed to use them? Clearly, and how does that game go, by the way, if they can use that angle from above and say, well, Nixon recovered the ball here on the opening kickoff, it's Green Bay ball. This is not Philadelphia ball.
Right.
So we're going to go back. We're going to reverse the call on the field, and it's going to be Green Bay ball and not Philadelphia ball at the Green Bay 28 to begin the game. And then you are stuck and you're up against it. To begin, they score a touchdown, 7-0, just like that mistake that was easily avoidable if they were able to use those overhead shots.
Yeah, completely agree. By the way, was that the clean hit that you were referring to with Tom Brady?
They only showed the one angle once?
Where it was crown of the helmet in the jaw.
Oh, so you noticed it too?
Yes.
Okay, but they played it with the volume too. Nixon got absolutely smoked right in the helmet.
Oh, the helmet.
Brady's like, yeah, totally clean hit.
That was way more egregious than the hit in the Broncos-Bills game, where it was shoulder to shoulder, right? And that got called. Yes,
he was going with the shoulder.
Yes, and I was, because it's funny because I was going back and rewatching the Packers game, and I was watching it with sound. And the first play when he fumbles it, you hear Brady go, "That's a clean hit," and I was like, "This must have been what Mitch is referring to." But you're right, like the things that are reviewable or not. I mean, you go back to these moments. I still don't understand how that touchdown for Buffalo held up at the back of the end zone.
Oh, my God. First of all, the athleticism on that play from him, it's phenomenal, awesome. But are we sure?
The foot hits out of bounds almost simultaneously with him getting possession. And we have seen guys get their spleen down and then still lose possession while they're going to the ground. They're like, "I'm sorry, not a catch."
Yeah.
But somehow that dude has instantaneous possession good enough that when his foot hits down, maybe a millisecond later, we're good. Nope, that's a touchdown. I think there's a lot of problems with the sport, but most of them you can kind of fix with reviews. I guess the argument would be you slow down a game which already takes a very long time.
Yeah.
If you start to include some of these other different angles and that you have to deal with some of the flaws that happen, but it rings a little hollow when you can fix some of the things, but not all of the things when it comes to some of these calls.
Yeah, thank God betting is a lot of fun with this sport, right? Or it makes it that much more interesting. Take away betting, take away fantasy. I don't even know what you have on your hands. I don't know, but that's neither here nor there. We are a gambling network, and that's what we love to do with it, obviously. Did you bet the Texans against the Chiefs?
Yes, I did.
You took 8.5?
Yes, I'm willing to go down on the ship, Mitch. This is part of the reason why I bet him against the Chargers, so this is just going to be a ride for me. That secondary is disgusting. They're awesome.
They have done a hell of a job at drafting.
Yes, and that's the best part. You look at it every single time they name a guy. It's like, oh, like homegrown guy that's drafted and developed. Like They have done such a phenomenal job, and they've done such a phenomenal job of supplanting some of the other positions. Like, of course, getting pass rushers with Hunter and being able to. It was such an impressive performance by those 4 down linemen when they were just going after Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt. That was supposed to be the strength for the Chargers. That was supposed to be the strength. You had questions about the interior, but those tackles got really beat up. I thought Slater a couple of times got pushed straight back into Herbert, got beat up. That defense was so impressive. And I would trust that defense going up against, I think, most everybody in the National Football League at this point. Now, there's still questions. Stroud did not play particularly well outside of some pretty big plays.
Well, what happens if it's not for that fluky play that they picked up?
Which one?
Well, the one that was what? Yes. I mean, it was going to be a massive loss.
The ball got snapped backwards, and he's running back, and he grabs it. That converted. He ultimately converts, was like a 3rd and 12 or something like that.
3rd and super long.
Yeah, it was really long. That, and then, of course, right before the half, where, the Red Sea parts, and he gets a massive run to set up essentially a field goal. No, you're absolutely right. And I think that when I go back and, in the grand scheme of things, if I watch the Texans not cover that game, I think it's going to be more about almost similar to what we watched on Sunday night between Minnesota and Detroit at the season finale, which was a defense that was doing everything possible to stop the Lions from scoring, but eventually the levee broke because they were just out on the field for too long and their offense couldn't do anything. I think that might be a shot because Stroud did not play well, to be specific, but man, you watch those DBs fly around and they cover guys so well. How many times they can break up passes. They're rarely caught out of position. The lone big play they gave up was a weird fluky one to McConkey near the end of the game. By the way, special teams immediately responds with the block punt, the block kick return. I love their defense and I love their special teams, and I will take that in a setting like that.
How will the Chiefs tackles hold up against Hunter and Anderson in this game?
I think it's going to be a bad matchup for them.
It's been a turnstile pretty much the entire year. They've had to do a patchwork job on this, and that's been one of the biggest issues. And again, here we're talking about, favorites. You got to make these numbers bigger, but this is a Chiefs team that had trouble covering numbers this year, and they played in so many one-score games, and now the number was 8.5 in the game against that kind of a defense, but it is Mahomes and Reed off the bye, and that's got to be stated because the guy's been so good for his entire career. I know you want to bring this up, so I will point out that the Texans defense was so good. This is a tweet from, it's either Sheel or Shale Capadia. My apologies, don't know how to say his first name. Out of 214 quarterback performances in the playoffs over the last 10 years, that Herbert game ranks 213th out of 214 in EPA per pass play. I remember this game. Yep. Only Brian Hoyer's game for the Texans in a 30-0 loss against the Chiefs in 2015 ranked lower. What do you have to say about Justin Herbert now, hot shot?
I mean, look, I will say first that I get it with Herbert. The athleticism's awesome. The arm is great. All that kind of stuff.
This is about to be an overreaction, I believe.
No. Well, I don't think so. I don't understand why he gets away with as much as he does. No. We crucify guys like Tua on a weekly basis for that team failing in the biggest moments. And I get told over the weekend, I trust Harbaugh and Herbert more. I'm like, why? What is Justin Herbert proven to you?
I think it's the combination of the two.
Would have done what?
Well, no, but I'm saying like Harbaugh's full career.
Sure, I can kind of understand it, but I also watched an offense going back to again, things that are staring you in the face, and then we question man, how did this happen? Right? It's the meme. It's the Andre meme where he's shooting Hannibal Buress on the couch, and he's like, how did this happen? Right? It's like, how did this offense with no wide receivers get shut down by an elite secondary? I just couldn't see this thing coming.
Yeah, no, okay.
Right? How did Justin Herbert, who really has nothing to show for in the postseason, not really show up here?
Well, nothing to show for. I mean, they could never make the playoffs, really. I mean,
but that's also part of it, isn't it?
Right.
We see guys elevate their teams all the time.
But here's where I think it's an overreaction with Herbert. It's because it is year number 1 with Harbaugh as the head coach. JVT.
But this is what I mean. We're making excuses again. Let's just keep doing it.
But is this an excuse or is this more factually based stuff I'm about to say? He seriously had 2 of the worst head coaches I've ever seen in my entire life early on with the Chargers. I mean, I thought it could never get worse than Anthony Lynn, and they did. Brandon Staley was worse than Anthony Lynn.
I don't think that's true. I think that's an overreaction. But Staley was not great. I think that's a small overreaction.
He might be on the Mount Rushmore of worst head coaches I've ever seen.
And, by the way, this is more of a conversation narrative thing for me than anything else. Again, I'm not saying I would not take Herbert. I get all of it. I get the athletic profile. I get the arm. I get all of it. But I'm saying in the grand scheme of how we talk about some of these quarterbacks and some of these other guys that have done more, and every year it's like we're doing right now. Well, he had some bad coaches, and the offensive line wasn't great, and he's only got Ladd McConkey. The guy's undefeated in hypotheticals. He's Tom Brady.
Well, he's not the SEC. I mean.
In hypothetical moments, in all these teams that we can make up and put Justin Herbert at quarterback, the guy's great. He's got 10 Super Bowls. But in reality, congrats on the 4 interceptions.
Okay, I think there's another overreaction going on about a head coach, not a quarterback, we'll get into. And 3-point props in the NBA have been solid as of late. I'll tell you who and how I'm betting them. And a development on a player in a sports betting scandal that'll knock your socks off.
This is Follow the Money on VSiN.
We will preview the bonus Monday Night Football game. Super Wildcard Weekend tonight.
Can't wait. VSiN primetime pregame crosstalk.
No, that's over with JVT.
Wow.
Yeah, the email should have been in your inbox a while back.
Yeah. But Paul let us know. Don't worry. The Monday that you had to miss for your 10th baby shower, Paul let us know.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll get into that coming up top of the hour. Here, It is a really good. You said this during one of the breaks. You're spot on. It's a really good NBA card tonight. And by the way, tomorrow night in college basketball, I'll say the same thing. Tomorrow night college basketball is incredible, the SEC slate, but we'll focus on some of the games that we have tonight. And so I say this all the time. You need to at least bookmark when you go to vsin.com and click on tools at the very top. You can then go down to NBA prop analyzer. It's phenomenal.
Best thing we have.
Right. Part of the daily handicap if you like betting NBA player props, which I do. So, and also, I've been concentrating a lot on made threes lately. I gave out a good one on vsin.com over the weekend. It was Anthony Simons over 3.5 at plus 128. I think he hit 7 of them. But if you, I'll put up the vSIN's, the tab there with the prop analyzer. And then I go to NBA.com and under stats, you can toggle through and you can look at like last 5 games, last 10 games, last 15 games, whatever, for all these players. And then just click on like 3-pointers made and attempted. They'll give you the leaders across the league. So when I see a guy who's attempting 12, 13, 14 threes a game and they're making 4.5 or maybe even like pushing 5 threes a game, and you put up a prop of 2.5 or 3.5, I have to bet that every single time. And if the juice is not something that would not make sense, then obviously, right? Yep. So an example of that would be tonight. And I did this on the air last week. It was a winner. I'll do it again tonight. Hopefully we'll win again. It's Jalen Green with the Houston Rockets. Good team. Good game tonight taking on the Grizzlies.
Can't wait.
So when you're toggling through the numbers at NBA.com, you're going to notice, like, you can go back, again, like I said, as many games you would like. But his last 4 games, and this is a conversation, again, like how much do you do recent form compared to like season-long form? Last 4 games, he's averaging 12 attempts and hitting 5.3 of them. That's 43.8%. So they just played Memphis. He went over 2.5 and went over 3.5. And so I like his chances of taking around 10 or maybe even more threes in this game tonight. And if that's the case, he shoots a pretty good percentage. I bet, and it's the G-Bank bet of the day for me here, and it's Jalen Green over 2.5 minus 155. I did a small ladder, only 1 rung.
Cool.
I went up over 3.5 plus 165. That's a smaller bet. I've explained before how you kind of want to break it up because if you bet the same amount on every one of these ladder bets and you go like 5-6 rungs on the ladder, you can get carried out if the guy has an off night, right? So I'm doing 2 rungs tonight on Jalen Green over 2.5. I laid minus 155 and I went over 3.5 plus 165.
Yeah, I don't mind it at all. Especially, obviously, Jabari Smith Jr. has been out.
Yeah, sure.
You got to supplement those threes from somewhere. He's averaging about 5 3-point attempts per game. Yep. So guys are going to take more. So I think that makes a ton of sense. By the way, Best Bets brought to you by G-Bank, the official bank of VSiN. I did have something here too in this game. So I went under 234 for the game.
Okay.
So again, like you're looking at 2 teams. I think you're going to get a pretty grinded out type of game between these two. They do like to get up and down, but 2 really good defensive teams. I think each has good defensive weapons for each of the other strengths, right? You've got good backcourt defenders for the Houston Rockets that can go after the backcourt with Ja Morant and others. For the Memphis Grizzlies on the flip side, you've got really good stout front court defenders that can go after some of the strengths, including Şengün for Houston. I think it's going to be a really good, fun defensive game. So I went under 234, still available at Circa, and you can find it's down to like 232.5 in some spots as well, but
okay.
234 still out there as well. But I bet this game under.
All right, so we're flying with 2 different G-Bank bets of the night.
Right.
In the same game.
That's right. And if you're serious about sports betting, you need the G-Bank Visa Signature Card. Most credit cards treat sportsbook and gaming transactions as cash advances, even when you put your own money on the card. G-Bank treats gaming transactions as purchases, so you're typically saving 3 to 5% on cash advance fees right there. Right now, for a limited time, you're going to receive a $250 bonus after you spend $1,000 in the first 90 days. Apply now at vsin.com/GBank, vsin.com/GBank, subject to credit approval. Terms and conditions apply.
I'll give you a couple of other players here tonight. Steph Curry over 4.5. That's the number. Did not bet it. Minus 125 was the lowest in the market. His last 10 games, he's averaging 11.7 attempts, making 4.6 of them. That's 39.3%. His last, if you want to even break it down a little bit more, last 7 games, 12.3 attempts, 5.3 makes, 43% overall. But that's a super high total because it's Steph Curry.
Yep.
Now, he's made exactly 8 threes in 3 games, like in the last 2 weeks. But when he goes on a heater, watch out. Not going to bet that one because it's too high for me. Another one that I'm considering here is Jordan Poole.
Okay.
It's 2.5 tonight. Minus 145 is the lowest juice. Now, he was 0 for 6 in his last game, but that was against OKC, best 3-point shooting defense in the league. In the 8 games before that, Poole averaged 11.6 threes per game attempted. Hit 5.1 of them, by the way, which is awesome, 44%. Memphis hit 16 threes against the Wolves over the weekend. That's who Washington is playing tonight. And 3 different players hit at least 3 threes in that game for Memphis.
Yeah.
So again, if you're telling me he's going to take 11, 12, 13 threes and he has to go over 2.5, like I can lay minus 145 with that.
Yep. And by the way, go to this Warriors game because this kind of the market moved up a little bit here in Golden State. We saw this open 4.5. We are up to 6 now. That is despite the fact that Draymond Green is sick and is questionable. Jonathan Kuminga, Gary Payton, and Brandon Podziemski all aren't playing here either.
Okay.
Yeah, so
they've had a lot of guys out here recently.
Yeah, and this is the time of year generally where you start to see some guys get ill and some things get passed around the locker room. So Green's ill, and that's part of it. So I would keep an eye on that because I was surprised at the market considering what we're seeing with absences for Golden State, right? Some good amount of their depth and Draymond potentially questionable. Emmanuel Quickley, the only name of note and that is questionable for Toronto. Okay. So something worth noting, but don't disagree with anything that you're talking about here with some of these player props.
Hey, you sent this over earlier today. Can you update us here on a sports betting scandal that was in the NBA?
So for those who don't remember, I'm sure a lot of us do, the Jonte Porter nonsense that had occurred where Jonte Porter gets found to be fixing some player prop results tied to him. Well, another person was arrested with connection to the Jonte Porter betting scandal. Porter, of course, pled guilty in July. 5 people who federal prosecutors call co-conspirators have now been arrested. So we're getting new filings here by the federal government that revealed a couple of things, including that Porter was texting an alleged co-conspirator during a Raptors game.
Wow.
To keep him updated on his status that day. The game is different than the NBA and the feds identified before that he had manipulated everything. So this
is another game.
Yes. From the filings. On or about January 23rd, co-conspirator 1 texted the defendant, Shane Hennon, a screenshot of a chat between co-conspirator 1 and 2 of co-conspirator 1's contacts. They stated the following. NBA player 1, I went back to the locker room to get eye checked on. I don't know if I'm going to play much more. I'm not starting the second half, but if it's garbage time, I will shoot 1,000,000 shots.
Oh, my Lord.
Holy smokes, man.
Well, for the co-conspirators here, JVT, this is an all-time, it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing that they're going to be involved with, right?
Yep.
Imagine getting tied up in this, and that's how far the NBA player is going to take it.
Yep.
To the point of where at halftime, he's like, I got to text my boys.
Yep. Let's see. Porter sent a message before January 26th game to an alleged co-conspirator. Quote, hit unders for the big numbers. I told co-conspirator 2, no blocks, no steals. I'm going to play the first 2 to 3 minute stint off the bench. Then when I get subbed out, tell them my eye is killing me again. And I want to point this out, too, because I think you and I were actually on the air together when this started to come out. It was when you guys were still in the morning. And if you remember, I had pointed out we always have to have these think pieces, right, about all this stuff. And I had pointed out a CNBC think piece about this. And the think piece ended with Jonte Porter wasn't ready for the world that was thrust upon him when the NBA started all these deals with these gambling networks. Jonte Porter was a grown man who willingly decided to try to do this.
Oh, for sure.
He was not just hypnotized by DraftKings and FanDuel's advertisements and deals with the NBA and then had no choice but to try to fix some results.
Yeah.
So
it's all evil. It's
right.
all bad. They're going to get you.
This is exactly this is so perfect because there were so many people that were trying to vilify the entire sports betting industry, and there's things that are wrong with it. You can totally talk about that. But this instance, this is a grown, mature adult with free will doing what he wanted to do. This has nothing to do with a lot of advertising for sports gambling.
You're spot on.
This is insane. By the way, get better at doing this. I was telling my wife the other day, because I don't know what we were watching, but it was like some true crime doc, and like they found like all this digital stuff, right? If I'm planning a crime, I'm writing it all down and then burning it when I'm done. Why are we still thinking that you can delete things digitally? If you and I are planning to murder Luke, I am writing it down on pen and paper, giving it to you, and we're burning it.
People will never learn. It's never like, I mean, this is not going to, it should, like, every athlete in the world should know about the story and be like, okay, I'm never going to do that. First of all, you shouldn't be fixing games anyway or fixing your props on any games like that.
Mitch is saying, if you are, though, write it down.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Everything that you do, obviously, you can go back.
Everything.
Yeah. And oh, by the way, I had to get a new phone this weekend. The stuff that you don't realize that you have lined up on your phone and use like most parts of the day.
Yep.
Holy hell's bells. I was like in shock. It's a long story. I don't even think it's worth getting into, but I was stuck. I was stuck this weekend, actually 3 times over the last week. It opens up my car.
Yep. It does, really?
When it goes dead, what do I do?
Wow.
Monday Night Football.
What a life.
Coming up next, we will preview this. I don't think you can look at what happened on Saturday and tie it into this game.